Welcome back to Que Pasa HSIs. I'm your host, Dr. Regina Ann Garcia, and on this episode, we're going to discuss the road to healing following the defunding of Title V grants and programs. What's up, fam? In this episode, we're going to elevate the voices of those most immediately impacted by the reprogramming of Title V Part A and B funding. As we know, on September 10th, 2025, the Department of Education announced it would reprogram discretionary funding for enrollment-based MSIs, including HSIs. The decision immediately impacted current grant recipients who received a notification of discontinuation letter stating that for grantees that were operating a multi-year project that was not in its final budget year, the department is providing a 1-year no-cost extension of the performance period on all discontinued awards in the aforementioned programs through September 30th, 2026, in order to allow discontinued grantees to finalize activities within the approved scope of the project and engage in an orderly closeout of program activities. That's quote unquote, that's direct from the letter. Current grant directors had to immediately act within 20 days to file that no cost extension. The loss of this funding had extensive implications, but one of my biggest concerns is the loss of jobs for full-time, part-time, and student employees. Many Title V grants utilize funds to hire staff to run programs supported by the grant. The human capital is an essential ingredient to the success of Title V grants at HSIs. But the loss of funding for support programs is also detrimental to campuses and the predominantly Latine, first generation, low income students who benefited from these programs. I'm joined today by Dr. Melissa Menendez, a full-time English instructor at Santa Barbara City College and the director of 2 Title V grants. She has spent significant time and energy building the HSI movement at SBCC in collaboration with students, classified professionals, faculty, managers, and administrators. Her work resulted in the creation of Raíces, First Year and Beyond, a student empowerment program that strives to cultivate striving scholars through culturally affirming advising, academic counseling, peer mentoring, programming, and courses taught by faculty who participate in the Raíces Faculty Institute, which she co-designed and co-facilitates. She accesses critical theory, including community cultural wealth, servingness framework, validation theory, and funds of knowledge to inform her perspective and commitment to educational justice. Also joining us is Nathalie Quintero, who is the program advisor for Raíces First Year and Beyond. She is a student success professional dedicated to empowering teams and students to ensure equity and inclusion with special attention to supporting student experiences and persistence to graduation. She has demonstrated ability and experience in leading through a lens of equity and racial consciousness to scaffold inclusive programming for student development at the community college, public and private university levels. So let's get into it. Melissa and Nathalie, thank you for joining us on Que Pasa HSIs, where we talk about all things HSIs. But first, let's talk about you. So, Melissa, let's bring you in. Let's just first start by hearing about your HSI journey.
Well, thank you, Gina, for inviting us to come and share our story on your podcast. I think this now made me cool to my daughter, so thank you. My ancestors are undocumented immigrants from Mexico and Guatemala. So, unfortunately, they experienced violence, exploitation, sexism, xenophobia, and racism, like many of our communities are experiencing today, with the rise of ICE violence and leadership allowing rampant injustice to flourish. So, consequently, my ancestors did not have access to formal education, much of what is happening right now. However, their knowledge of hard work, resilience, and comunidad was passed down through the generations. So I share my testimonial because it is why I do this work. Through my family members and our stories, I deeply understand how generational trauma, race and ethnic identities, culture, caring for dependents, documentation status, learning differences, socioeconomics, language, military war service, and being system impacted plays a significant role in the success of our students and the necessity to cultivate culturally affirming and equitable services for all students. So my ancestors finally settled in a little town called Mendota, which is an hour's drive away from Fresno, California, which is in the Central Valley of California. So I was born and raised in Fresno, and I began my higher ed journey at CSU Fresno, or Fresno State as it's locally called. It
Mm-hmm.
was an HSI, but being the mid 90s, it wasn't apparent that it was an HSI. So while
Mm-hmm.
there, I chose to pursue a degree in English because many women in my family are culture bearers through oral storytelling. So for me, storytelling and literature provide such deep insight into the human condition, allowing listeners and readers to grow in their sense of compassion and empathy for one another. I also knew that I wanted to be a teacher, and therefore I saw this discipline as a way to liberate my future students, to amplify their skills at sharing their stories, their perspectives, so that their voices and experiences could impact necessary systemic change. I then earned my master's and doctorate degrees in English from Claremont Graduate University. So, although Fresno is a beautifully diverse community, as an English major, I often found myself in predominantly white classrooms, and then later as a graduate student in a predominantly white institution. And consequently, I intimately understand the feelings of imposter phenomenon that arise as a result. So, without creating a classroom or campus culture that acknowledges, celebrates, and affirms diversity and inclusivity, we risk contributing to the kind of microaggressions that can cause and perpetuate imposter phenomenon, resulting in those who are being excluded to exit the institution. This consequence, to me, has dire social justice implications, and these are the reasons why I also do this work. I've centered my 20 plus year career on serving vulnerable and marginalized student populations by engaging in program and curricular development and collaborating with my colleagues to implement institutional policy and practice changes to increase access, equity, and success outcomes for those students. So my own journey reflects the promise of what an education can provide. And through my work, I hope to inspire students to feel empowered, to dismantle barriers, and to manifest their own dreams like I did.
Awesome. Thank you for that beautiful story. I always talk about, I went to Cal State University Northridge and same
Mhm.
thing. I'm like, it was an HSI, but not really, because it was like same thing, mid 90s, the designation was barely coming into
Yes.
play and it wasn't really a conversation we were having.
Yeah. Yep.
But it was already at that critical moment, right? That critical enrollment where we could feel it, right? You could
Yeah.
feel the critical mass on campus of Latine
Yes.
students. So yeah, it's a whole nother interesting sort of phenomenon of like
Yeah.
whether or not we claim we went to an HSI. I definitely say, yeah, no, I went to an HSI. But it's also evolved into a different type of
Mhm.
HSI now, as has
Mhm.
Fresno State. So
Yes.
so thank you for that. Natalie, go ahead and tell us your journey, your HSI journey.
Of course. And sometimes I feel like I like get caught up in the weeds. So asking me HSI journey, I'm like, okay, HSI. And for me, like my journey doesn't start or end with an institution.
Yeah.
It really does start with my family, my community, especially my abuelitos, right? Like when I think about the true embodiment of what it means to serve someone, it goes to my grandma immediately. And right, she was so much more than that, right? She was so much in servingness, but she was so good at it.
Mhm.
So good to the point that like the needs I was aware of as a child were being met, and now that I reflect on it, needs that I wasn't aware of were being met. So I want to give credit to her and to my community for nurturing me that way.
Mhm.
And the other ways it was nurtured, looking back on it now too, I'm like, oh wow, like how resourceful were my parents is so many of my senses were shaped by federal funding. So how I got to school, what I ate at school, what I watched on TV, like what I did after school have been shaped in one way or in a way one way or the other by federal funding. And I'm like so grateful that my
Mhm.
parents had the hindsight to do that for me.
Right.
Um, a pivotal moment for me in my journey, aside from like this family and community, is definitely my undergraduate experience. I went to what is now an EHSRI. Doesn't roll off the tongue as
Yes.
nicely as HSI.
Yes.
And I felt I felt that it wasn't that, right? Like I it was hard to identify with folks, to identify with staff. But what shifted and helped mitigate those feelings was definitely seeing what I thought anecdotally I was observing being spoken about in my classes. So I'm so thankful that I was able to take classes with Dr. like Daniel Solorzano, Doctora Silvia Hurtado,
Mhm.
who taught me and opened my eyes to racial identity development, student development,
Mhm.
and being an undergrad in those spaces and having the vocabulary to validate, like, oh, this is a thing. It's not something I'm observing. It's a
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, I think put power in my hands to go from this is what I feel to like what can I do about it? What can people do about it?
Mhm.
So I feel like that coupled right with at the time the statistics were different from the post-secondary educational pipeline for Latino students. I remember vividly reading right it was referred to as like a pipeline with many leaks.
Mhm.
And having
Mhm.
gone to a community college myself, I remember thinking, I don't know if it's more of a leak thing. Yes, I see the leaks, but it feels like a clog of sorts. It feels like I was there for so long and I saw people from day one that I still recognized from day of graduation still there.
Mhm.
And I'm like, whether they take breaks or they come back, they're here. And
Mhm.
how can we serve them better? So I think all of this was really like a call to action for me, or it was just more so validation of like, that's where I want to be.
Mhm.
That's where I want to go. So immediately after, like, I started doing work, serving this work, and getting paid for it, I guess. Um, but I think it led me to working at a private four-year institution, which it wasn't an HSI and still isn't,
Mhm.
but we were able to do really good servingness work
Mhm.
there surrounding their first gen population that had been admitted, focusing on that transitional period from admission to matriculation. Like, how do we make sure like they're aware of the setting they're walking into, that their families feel a part of the conversation, that they enroll in the right classes that first semester. So it was really it was really great to work with someone that, right, like I had fears walking into that, like,
Mhm.
are they willing to do this work and do it correctly? But it was great because we even like over time built collaborations on cross campus so it didn't feel like a siloed thing, whether it was the office of orientation, enrollment, eventually faculty, like starting those relationships and involving students in that. Like, that
Mhm.
was like my biggest thing. I was like, we need the student voice here. um, so to be able to introduce them and walk them through putting on a family orientation for these
Mhm.
students, and then taking a step back in the lulls of that programming and be like, okay, like let's talk assessment here. Like,
Mhm.
this is the things we want to measure. What trends are you seeing? And then having like passing the baton and having them lead those efforts year after year. um, I remember sitting in those my meetings with my supervisor. She was always like, "What's next for you, Natalie?" Like, I think you talk a lot about, right, your experience at a community college and how much you love this work, but what's next? And my answer was very similar every single time. It was like, I want to work with a population that like is so near and dear to my heart, like
Mhm.
a population I identify with. I want to go back to the community college system, and it would be the same every time. And I feel like I manifested or spoken into existence. It took years to get here, but Raíces is that. So I'm so like thankful that my journey has come a circle, but right now I'm in that position again of like, what's next
Mhm.
for different circumstances,
Mhm.
but it's a question nonetheless.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for that. I love that you talked about how you were working at a non-HSI, but servingness was there, right? And
Hmm.
I want to like put an exclamation point on that because servingness is so many things, right? And
Right.
obviously it was we theorized it because of HSIs and through the HSI lens, but servingness has become so much more to people, and it has moved, morphed beyond HSIs. And at this moment, when people are feeling like, are we still in HSI if we don't get funding? I'm like, yes, and you can still do serving this
Mhm.
work.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
want to put that exclamation on there to say you named it and said we were
Yeah.
doing serving us right with being an HSI without having funding, and that's what we're going to talk about right now too is
Yeah.
like what does it look like to do it with funding, and how do we move beyond that when the funding is pulled from underneath us, right? Like dramatically pulled from underneath us, right? Um, so thank you for that. I really,
Hmm.
really appreciate that. So let's talk about the grants. Melissa, tell us about the two Title V grants that you directed. I'm not sure if it's past tense. You'll tell us that, I'm sure, at Santa Barbara City College.
So one of the grants that I direct is called Rise. And so on October 1st of this year, it was entering its fifth year. The other grant that I
Okay.
co-direct is called La Experiencia. And again, on October 1st of this year, it was entering its fourth year. So both, but from a grant perspective or from a grant director perspective, both of these grants had the potential to ask for a no cost extension year after the original 5 years. Because when I was reviewing the budget, it was clear that there would be unspent funds after year 5. So,
Mhm.
although RISE grant was entering its fifth year, we still had the potential to have applied for a no cost extension year and thus continue with some funding for a sixth year. And then using that same
Mhm.
logic, we would have also gained 2 years with La Experiencia. I think it's important to point this out because when I received the letters of discontinuation for each of the grants, I saw the discontinuation in these terms. And some of the messaging that was sent to the campus community from our superintendent president, Dr. Erica Edry Jonas, noted that the RISE grant was in its last year anyway. But when we are understanding the larger impact of funding and the possibility of being able to extend that funding for another year, and we consider dollar amounts, we lost over $1 million that could have been spent to support our Hispanic Latinx low income, part time, first generation students, as well as all
Yes.
students who indirectly benefit from
Mm.
programs, as well as policy, practice, culture change that comes out of this funding. So the discontinuation letter was followed, as you were doing in the opening, with the process to file the no cost extension. So I filed it, but I didn't have the 20 days. I had only 10 because by the time I got the template from my program officers, I had 10 days and not 10 business days. I had 10
Mhm.
days. And
Yep.
so there I was, revising all the budgets, writing all the explanations that were detailing the accomplishments of the work, and then also writing all of the justifications for why we needed to have the year extension in order to try to meet some of those grant objectives. So yes, we were awarded the no cost extension for both of those grants, so that September 30th of 2026 will be the end of both.
Right. Okay. Thank you for telling us about that, because that's the real life stories that like we want to bring to life, right? Like this is what
Mhm.
happened, right? And it's like, yeah, you had 10 days and it was like you don't put it on your to-do list. Like, I got to get to this. Like it's like immediately, right? Like, one of those situations we've all been in is like you everything else out the door. You immediately go into like this
Yes.
process, right? You need to. There's no other option, right? And
Yeah.
so that was the kind of pressure that people were under at that time, right? And just unnecessarily put under these traumatic stress situations, right? um
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so tell us about the grant and how you had been using it. It sounds like you've
Mhm.
had it. I mean, obviously they were coming to an end, not that that's okay, but they were coming to an end. So you've had some significant time with them. So tell us how you've used the grants to actually move the campus towards intentional servingness.
Well, I've been at Santa Barbara City College for 19 years. So, unlike my Fresno State years, I had gained a critical consciousness and awareness of what an HSI is. And as a Latina, a Chicana, a professor of English, I wanted to build a career as an HSI practitioner. So SBCC was already an HSI when I was hired. I know that because when I applied, I looked at those student demographics since that was important to me to be at an HSI institution. However, the college applied for official designation in 2011. And I believe soon after is when they received their first federal grant as a result of the designation. I share this
Mm-hmm.
history because it provides the context of why I wanted to serve as an HSI grant director and why the work accomplished towards intentional servingness is really 19 years in the making. Folks may
Mm-hmm.
see it as work of the 4 or the 5 years of the grant, but for me, the ideas, the collaborations, the goals, they've
Mm-hmm.
been forming over the last 19 years. So the
Mm-hmm.
funding just helped me facilitate the work. So when I started in
Yes.
the role, I learned from many members of our student services departments that we needed a first year experience program. So therefore, I used this opportunity to reimagine what a first year experience program could be for an HSI with over 40% of its student population identifying as Hispanic Latino, um, a number that's only going to increase. And thus, we need to design new programs with race consciousness and intentionality of who we are serving now and who we're going to serve in the future. So in
Yeah.
September of 2023, we launched Raíces. And because because the Raíces support team understand historical exclusion of marginalized and minoritized student groups and its impact on current patterns of participation and outcomes, we approach this work from a culturally affirming, equity focused, asset based perspective. Um, so, to provide more intentional academic support, my vision was to create learning community course offerings taught by faculty who desired to manifest classroom spaces of liberation, humanization, and healing. So, to bring
Mm-hmm.
together this community of faculty, I collaborated with our faculty professional development coordinator, Dr. Justina Bueller, who is an amazing ally and friend. And so we
Mm-hmm.
designed and facilitated the Raíces Faculty Institute. So that's another project that was grant funded. And so we actually, the initial year, we sought other funding, but then we were brought into a writing team for the La Experiencia grant. So then the La Experiencia
Mm-hmm.
grant is what funds that work. Um, the three core pillars of Raíces is culture, cultura, knowledge, conocimiento, and community, comunidad. So therefore, the grant funding has been used to support campus-wide events and initiatives that honor those three pillars. So for Cultura, we've, organized the Art of Being series where we've brought in Latino identifying artists to share their work, showcase their work, lead workshops. We've had keynote speakers. We've funded a lot of Hispanic Latina Heritage Month events. And then we created what we call Si Se Puede Month in March, kind of in honor of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and their work. So many of these events have been
Mm-hmm.
done in collaboration with campus partners, right, or other equity program advocates. For
Right.
conocimiento, right, we've developed career skill workshops again in collaboration with our career center. transfer workshops in collaboration with our transfer achievement program, which is a transfer program that is specific for historically marginalized student populations. We've developed financial aid workshops, again, in collaboration with our financial aid advisors, study abroad scholarship opportunities in collaboration with our study abroad office, Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, right? HACU. We've done internship workshops in
Mhm.
collaboration with their representatives. And then for Comunidad, we've started HSI Week celebration. And then this year, we did a HSI HBCU Week. So we partnered with our Emoja community to celebrate both weeks together. We've developed a fall and a spring bienvenida. We do welcome week events during week one, which always have food involved, either lunch or breakfast. And then we have our end of semester celebrations. Um, so
Mhm.
we've also, with grant funding, we created La Placita, so we call the affinity space on our campus for our students. In fact, we were blessed to have Doctora Elizabeth Gonzalez, the director of Hispanic Serving Institution
Nice.
Initiatives, right at UCLA's Office of the Chancellor, to serve as our keynote speaker for this year's joint Raíces and Emoja anniversary celebration in September. And Elizabeth visited La Placita and said that our space is exactly what she hopes the space at UCLA will become. There were many
Mhm.
students hanging out, students studying. There was a lot of life. Cumbias was playing in the overhead speaker, so that's kind of like our space. Um, Another thing that we've done with the funding, I've collaborated with Dr. Veronica Famat. She's the HSI director at UCSB to create a special campus visit for our Hispanic students and our Raíces scholars. I've also collaborated with Dr. Cynthia Estrada. She is over at CSU Channel Islands. And then she connected me with the Student Academic Success and Equity Initiatives Office, specifically with Elena Yarlomo. And so together we did a similar trip where we brought students to have a more intimate campus tour. So again, transfer, right? Increased transfer. We also were a part of the inaugural Hispanic Latinx graduation celebration that we had in
Mhm.
May. Celebrando Nuestros Trifinos is what the students wanted to call it. And I was actually honored to serve as the keynote at the event. The students asked for me to serve in that capacity. Some of the grant funds also went to support that transfer achievement program that I mentioned, to grow that program. And we also use grant funds to provide outreach materials and other support for our enrollment services. And then another big project we did was when I was kind of on that listening tour to hear from our student services departments what our gaps were. I was hearing that they wanted and needed specific professional development for the kind of work that they do with students. And so that's where some of the grant funding has also gone. And we kicked that off with you, Gino, and you came and did a 3-day
Mhm.
workshop for our student
Yep.
services departments. And since then, we've had annual trainings. And this year, I'm collaborating with Escala Educational Services Inc. And we're kind of creating a more specialized version of their practitioner conocimiento series for that group.
Yeah. Wow. A lot. So much, right? When you're speaking, it's like this is the loss, right? That funding, right? Something you said is important though, and when you started, you said something that reminded me of something that Dr. Alejandro Gradia said a few seasons ago, which was you were doing the work and you were going to do the work anyways. The grant just gave you the capacity to do it, right? It gave you
Mhm.
it was a lever for making that change, right? Even though
Yes.
you're going to do it anyway, right?
Yes.
And that's where we're at. really is like without the grant funding, we're going to continue to do these things, right? We're just going to
Yeah.
have to be more creative. Um, but the funding allowed you to create this sort of right. A lot of the things you said were about environmental sort of
Yes.
experiential things for students, which
Hmm.
matter, right, to students.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I mean, I asked my students to UC Berkeley to talk about what they take pictures of campus. Where do they feel like they belong? And it is the
Mhm.
experiential activities,
Yeah.
right? They're not naming things that me and you know are really, really important, like faculty development, right? Like
Yeah.
professional for faculty, absolutely really important. They're not naming that because they
No.
don't immediately see the impact,
Hmm.
right? Of that. Well, we know the impact of that creates better environment for the students as well, right? It
Yes.
eliminates the microaggressions in the class. It elevates their lived experience in the classroom. Things that have to happen as well, right? But those like experiences matter to them so much. That is what they say over and over again. This will make us an HSI, right? For us, we're not there.
Mhm.
So they say when we get there, these are the things that need to be in place, right? And it
Yes.
is very much a lot of the things you named, right? But it's so vast, and that's what Title V allowed us to do, right? It allowed
Yes.
y'all as a campus to explore and implement and do these things. Um, so yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Wanted to just add too, it gave me because I had the money, I could do it, but also, we are working in institutions. So being in that role gave me the authority to do it as well, if
Mhm.
that makes any
Mm.
sense. The title mattered not to me,
Yes,
but to some of the other folks, on campus.
Mhm.
to the campus community. Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely say that. That matters a lot. Yep.
Hmm.
So Natalie, talk to us. One thing I know Melissa didn't go deep into Raíces first year and beyond because we wanted to give you that opportunity to talk about that. But I know that's an important, piece of what y'all have been able to do. So talk to us about the program and how it was supported by the funding and also the moves to institutionalize it, right? Especially in this.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the program, I think in summary of what Melissa listed, right? It's really at this interesting intersection of student affairs and academic affairs. She named faculty training, she named the events we put on, but because of her and her leadership and sitting at that intersection, we offer courses with those faculty members. And I think that's one of the important parts of like the first year and beyond. A lot of our courses satisfy every level of GE a student would need to either just graduate from that institution, transfer to either CSU UC. Um, but these are courses really with faculty that are really committed to uh, not making education so intimidating, right? Like it is about student growth. It's about students finding their voice ultimately, whether it's English or engineering. And we have both of those, right? We have engineering, we have math, we have statistics, which is amazing. So, I always tell students when I onboard them, I'm like, because they come into La Placita, I'm like, all of this, some of it you can see with your eyes, and some of it you can't. Some of it you will experience when you get in that class, and hopefully you come back and you tell me if you experience anything different. I need to know. But then they do come back and you're like, yeah, like you were right, and I'm so glad I took that professor. I'm gonna change my major, or like now I know for sure I'm gonna enroll next semester, because that first semester in terms of like courses, like they had a good experience. So I think the program is unique in that sense, and all of the kudos, right, go to Dr. Melissa Menendez, who set that up from the get-go. I know you had help with Justina and Tino as the program grew, but you started it and you were very intentional with the courses.
Mhm.
Um, Aside from that, the program I feel like is home. Like I hear that, right? It's home for a lot of students, especially right when we think of the context of Santa Barbara City College. Housing's so unaffordable, so much of our staff and faculty don't live
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
And so the students that do live there are generational in that city.
Hmm.
If not, if they haven't been pushed out already, it's home to right those native folks in that region. It's home to our commuters. It's home to our student parents. A lot of these folks who the landscape has shifted so much where it's like this room, our La Placita, is where they find themselves comfortable, where their needs can be met. Um, so the program touches a lot of areas. In terms of like how it's been supported by funding, all of it, like 100%. And hopefully I'm not jumping the gun here, Gina. But right in terms of like the loss of this funding and if this program's going to continue, that's been of interesting conversation. It's been an interesting one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the program, for a good amount of time, we were very unsure what's going to happen. There's been recent developments because of our Student Equity and Achievement Committee on campus, right? They're willing to support the funding for the program advisor position throughout the rest of the 26-27 school year. So they're picking up that support from the September to like June-ish range,
Mm-hmm.
which was a small, well, I don't want to say small, but it was a win. It was something for us to say this is an indication that this program might continue to the
Hmm.
capacity it would continue to. If it's going to call Raíces, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But at least we know that this position is going to carry on, and hopefully whether it's me, whether it's someone else, hopefully it does have that same lens of understanding the students we serve and why this position is different from other program advisors on campus. um, I know you spoke a bit earlier in the intro, right? Of like, there is a lot of loss of jobs right now. I found I found myself questioning if that was gonna be me, and so much of our staff on our team is questioning that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm trying to look at the win that we have
Mm-hmm.
and see that like, okay, this program might continue, and again, whether it's me or someone else, someone's gonna have that amazing opportunity.
Mhm. Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for getting into the really, hard questions I'm going to ask y'all, right? Is talking about and thinking about the loss, right? I this idea of grieving loss, I want to
Hmm.
spend this whole talking about that because I think we haven't had the opportunity to come together. I'm really looking forward to ASI this year. If y'all aren't going, I hope
Hmm.
you will. That's
Yeah.
going to, we grieve together so we can move
Hmm.
on, right? Like he's going to be an important space for us this year to come together and spend time going through that, right? We need to go through that. So
Hmm.
so I'm going to ask y'all, how are you grieving the loss of this funding and working through that grief, right? So I'll turn it to Dr. Menendez to start with that.
Well, I think I I want to start again a little bit with, up until 2021, none of my, fellow Hispanic or Latinx identifying colleagues had ever served in this kind of a position before. So when the call came out, I applied, and there were a few other applicants, but I was chosen by a committee to take on the RISE grant. So therefore, my appointment is a milestone for my campus. So
Mhm.
professionally, right, serving in this role, like I kind of said earlier, it provided me the opportunity to facilitate all of the campus-wide initiatives that I described, and really to integrate instruction, student services, and academic support to increase student success, right? So authentic wraparound services. But like many HSI practitioners, this work, it's personal. So developing Raíces is a culmination of both my personal motivation to do this work as well as my professional career. Um, and you know, it, developing Raíces comes from my lived experience as a first generation Latina student, navigating institutional culture and policies, right? Mentoring students within the community college system for over 20 years. And then just the years of reading and reflecting upon scholarship and best practices, right? So the loss of these funds was and still is traumatic.
Hmm.
Traumatic
Yeah.
on both a personal and a professional level. The program is only beginning its third year. And as we know,
Mhm.
programs or new initiatives, they need time to cultivate and
Mhm.
grow. And so
Mhm.
now this path to institutionalization has been accelerated, which,
Mhm.
creates a lot of the uncertainty that Natalie was kind of suggesting, and also a sense of urgency, and not perhaps the appropriate amount of time to make decisions that truly center the
Mhm.
student's needs.
Mhm.
So, we started this program in fall of 2023. That's when we launched. We had under 50 students enrolled in the program. Now we have nearly 400. And so that's, not even a full 3 years. So we've grown a lot. And without a strategic or intentional recruitment outreach plan. So that was going to be the focus of this year's work. That's what I was going to start focusing on. But instead, my focus became on preserving what we have. So personally, I can't help but feel a little bit like I've failed our students because the
Mm.
program doesn't have the necessary resources and time, to fully realize its potential. But then, when I think on that further, I think personalizing this failure is what the system wants me to feel,
Mhm.
rather
Yes.
than recognize that budgets are value statements and that this program doesn't have to end or change, especially if it's serving a need to support our
Mhm.
students. The
Mhm.
decision to provide the resources for Raíces, it's not mine to make. And thus,
Mhm.
what happens is actually not a product of what I have or haven't done.
Mhm.
It's the result
Mhm.
of those
Mhm.
who do have that power to make the decision.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Ooh, the internalization of like failure, right? Is just, oh, that one hit like, oh. And it just has me starting to think about like also, our students are relying on these things. And if they go away,
Yep.
the narratives that students will tell will not tell this narrative, right? They're not going to say,
Mm-mm.
they're not going to track it back and say Department of Education defunded Title V on September 10th, and this happened, and they're going to just say
Right.
the campus has failed us. The campus has shut
Yes.
us down, right? That's happening on my campus right now, right? A center that was temporarily shut down. It's like all this narrative goes on, and we don't really know what
Mhm.
actually has happened behind the scene, but the narrative starts. And as soon as a
Yeah.
newspaper gets a hold of it, forget it. The newspaper tells their narrative, right? And they
Yes.
take on why this stuff has stopped, right? And immediately blames us, right? And the people who are responsible for carrying this out. Um so yeah, how do we get ahead of that? I'm starting to think, right? As something to think out loud with, of how do we get ahead, and that's for everybody listening, but also y'all, how do we get ahead of that narrative, because students will start to talk when these things go away. I see Natalie, you're like, "Ooh, yes,
Yes.
you think it."
Gina, yes, like you are exactly naming what I wanted to share with you, right? Like
Mhm,
we are finding ourselves not being able to get ahead of it before the funding was officially removed. When there was murmurs, right, of like
mhm,
what we're doing could have been interpreted a certain way. Yeah, our local newspapers or student newspapers already had a hold of it. So it was out.
Running with
And that yes, and that coincided and they named us.
it. Mhm.
And that coincided when we were doing outreach for the new cycle of students coming in. So I have such a vivid memory of tabling, like recruiting students, telling them what we're about, especially for those that like, oh yeah, I know I can't qualify for something else. I was telling them, and like with the blankest stare ever, and just being like, okay, once you're done talking, I have a question. And the question was, okay, but are you even going to be around by the time I'm here?
Mm,
And that like it took me for a pause,
mm,
because exactly to your point, that was an indication that their trust, they were starting to question the trust, not only that I was trying to build with them, but the trust the institution has of even having us out there.
mhm,
Right, to some point we have to
mm,
ask ourselves, at one point does it become and ethical when we don't know the answers, and we're trying to send messages that it's like, well, if we're not, like, we still put you with programs, like, but should we really be recruiting?
Mhm.
And that was a point that we found ourselves in. And like, I really appreciate us talking about, right, obviously the grieving for us and what it means for all of us, but especially for the students. That's the student perspective of those that aren't even in the institution. Those are in our program.
Mm.
They're coming to us on a daily whenever new information comes out of like, oh, like, what can I do to help? Can I help fundraise? Can I write a letter somewhere? Can I talk to someone? And I'm like, okay, points for us, right? Like civic engagement. I love it.
Mhm.
But also part of me is like, y- this is our responsibility, ours in the institution, to discuss these things, because
Mhm.
we are supposed to be crafting this for you. um and when that communication is only going kind of one way, or what it feels like one way, it feels like, again, it feels like we're failing. And it I can't help but think, right, like, the students, how are the students that we haven't welcomed and we haven't embraced but are already at the institution,
Mhm.
like, if I'm already seeing loss of trust, if I'm already seeing wanting to take action from other students, those students that are on our campus but aren't part of anything, like, what are they feeling? I would imagine it's it's a combination of those things, and that breaks my heart, because
Mhm.
there sh- there should be more clear messaging for them.
Mhm. Yeah, so much that we have to manage and deal with. With the a question about grieving of loss, I think you kind of got into it also a little bit, Natalie. But I don't know if you want to give you a little bit more space to talk about the idea that you are questioning whether or not you're even going to have a job, and having to start to figure out whether or not, right? Like I hear, people like starting to look for new jobs, right? While you're in this weird space of like, am I going to have a job? Which is a
Mhm.
loss to the campus, right? Like somebody that we've invested time and energy in is now considering leaving, right? Because of that. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, right, as well, right, as far as the grieving or potential loss of your job.
Of course. I mean, when I reflect on, like, what it has meant to be in this job, that outweighs entirely to me, like, what it can mean to potentially lose it. And I realize that comes from a very, like, privileged background to be able to say that, right? And it if you would have asked me like a month ago, different answer, because I had no idea
Mm,
C funding hadn't been redirected.
right.
So, right, that's coming from that place. Um, but yeah, I think about all those other folks that we've talked to people at different campuses where, yeah, they've got the notice. You have until this date.
Hmm.
Start looking.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of our staff, right, because of the C funding, has only been redirected to my current position as a program advising. That means all of our other staff, our counselors, our hourlies,
Mhm.
Hmm.
um, everybody, they are really starting to feel the pressure to look, and right now isn't the best time for a lot of reasons.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's been a roller coaster, and in having experience, right? Because even finding this job in the first place wasn't easy. Right? It comes it comes out of, yes, an institution grabbing these funds, dedicating it to this position, and then also in this culturally affirming way. It's like finding a diamond in, like, a pile of rocks. That's what it felt like. It took patience, it took years to get to where I am in this exact position. And with that came a lot of challenges for mental health. It became a second wave of imposter syndrome that I experienced at different institutions, and really questioning, is what I value what other people value? And if it's not, does it have any inherent value? And those are really troubling concepts for someone to hold on to that has other lived experiences. So for those that are in that position right now of, like, really really asking themselves those questions with the uncertainty of employment and stability, Like, I just really hope that you all are taking care of your mental health. I
Mhm.
like that's like the biggest thing I think we have right now.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So, right? I
Mhm.
think Melissa, you were talking about that's what the system wants you to feel. Let's not give that power.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Let's harness the power we have. Let's nurture ourselves because that's what we can do.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. Thank
Mhm.
you for that. I think that gets into the second part of the question really is as we grieve loss and we work through that grief, then how do we find hope, right? And joy
Mhm.
in this time. So I wanted to give you all that opportunity as well to say, well, how are you finding your hope and your joy in this time that is, it's
Yeah.
trying, it's testing
Yeah.
us, testing our
You know,
ability
I
to be.
Right. I
Mhm.
want to kind of talk too about Natalie's position because I advocated to keep her position. Obviously, I think your listeners in
Mhm.
this podcast see exactly why I advocated to keep this amazing person at our
Mhm.
institution and the job she was hired to do and serve as this Raíces program advisor because we have no program without her, right? Without that role.
Right.
So I called the meeting with our vice president of student affairs and our vice president of academic affairs. I did the advocating to keep this position because I said if we don't have it, we have no program, and we're falsely advertising to students. They presented, my proposal, if you will, to our superintendent president, and so then she was the one who asked the vice president of student affairs to bring the ask to the Student Equity and Achievement Committee, right? So that's kind of how the chain went. And I think it's important to name that because it wasn't the administration trying to solve the problem. I was the one that had to try to solve the problem of keeping
Mhm.
at least that person employed. Thankfully, the committee supported, funding the position, and as Natalie explained, but yeah, as Natalie also explained, the other stuff is still up in the air, right? All
Hmm.
of the events, even a budget for the program, just the
Yep.
staffing. At this point, we have no other commitments. And
Mhm.
I think the idea, though, with the C funding, or at least this is what was said, is we're using that funding, but the intention is between now and then to figure out where Raíces will live, to figure out what institutionalization is going to look like, and then we'll find other funding, right? More general funds, and so that's the idea. But again, we
Mhm.
don't know. We don't know what this really means.
Mhm.
So I think for me, the hope and joy and getting through this, you know, I, to be honest, I don't think I haven't completely grieved yet.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
I've been too focused
Real.
on trying to preserve and nurture and be,
Yes.
be resilient and cultivate what we have. So that's been my focus. So I've been pushing the grief away a little bit, I think. I think October of 2026 is probably when that grieving is really going to kick in. And also
Right.
when I
Right.
see what happens with Raíces in
Mhm.
particular. So that's just,
Mhm.
the reality. I think what keeps me going, though, is connecting with the larger HSI practitioner community. A
Mhm.
big outcome of all of this work is now having a community in colegas, having a community in ASI, having a community
Mhm.
in Haku. Like these are
Mhm.
organizations that, have
Mhm.
developed and have provided that support for me. Now I know a lot of amazing, trailblazers and leaders on other campuses that are doing, profound work. And so now I have a network that I can go to ask for support, to get ideas, and to go through the grief, in community. As you were pointing out earlier around ASI, I was at ASI, this year, and that's when the US Department
Mhm.
of Ed had cut. Remember, they made all the
Yeah.
major cuts. And my program officer, while I was at ASI, emailed me saying, I've been fired from my job. And so this was happening as I was at ASI. And you're right, that was the space. I was so glad I was there because there was a lot happening around us. So that's been my joy, and what I'm very thankful for in terms of this role is now I have a support team that is beyond the walls of SBCC, and I'm excited about that and having those new friends and colleagues to to work with.
Yes, we need the communities right now. Our communities are strong. They are, and they're going to remain intact. So
Hmm.
your answer reminds loss of a parent, right? And there are multiple siblings, and like each sibling deals with it different. And you're in the like the older sibling state, right? Of like I have to care for everybody, I have to take
Yeah,
care of everything, I have to manage everything, time to grieve. And the younger siblings might be like, I'm sad right now. Leave me alone, right? Like, and that's okay, right? That we're all gonna have to deal with the loss in different ways and at different times, right? So thank you for
yeah,
normalizing, saying I haven't even got to that yet, Gina. Right? Ask me again in September. And I
right.
might to say like, how are you dealing with it now, right? But I'm glad you're finding joy in different ways. Natalie, same question. How are you finding hope and joy in this time?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I think I needed this conversation more than I realized because
Oh,
hearing Dr. Melissa Menendez talk and your questions, I'm like, yeah, like I haven't given myself the minute to like think about it because I'm like, I'm still my brain is still like, right? Like, what does this grief look like and all of that. And I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? Like, yes, this is traumatic. Like as someone who was not only first gen like in terms of going to college, but first gen like professional and
Mm,
being able to choose what I do, like that's a lot. So like hope and joy, my mind is like boggled. But I think I ground myself. I removed myself from the grief and ground myself in the fact that right, like there's been historical moments where maybe society and federal law wasn't on the right side. Maybe it set up folks
mhm,
for something bleak.
mhm,
And let's not try to think too deep about like how long it took to even put a band-aid on it and like mitigate those impacts,
mhm,
but eventually society got there. Eventually there was movements and healing that happened. So currently I feel like I'm still like trying to get my feet on the ground and like realize what reality is.
mhm,
But hope and joy, I mean, I do my best to like, even though this work is so tied up with my personal values and who I am in the world and how the world sees me, right?
mhm,
I do my best to like once I leave the office, once I leave La Placita, like focusing on what's in front of me
mhm,
because I'm not trying to let that pass by either.
mhm,
So maybe I need to go for more walks. Not maybe I do,
mhm,
but like the moments that allow me to be present and anchored in what has even brought me here in the first place. So my family, my partner, all of it. They're really my source of hope and joy.
mhm.
So I try not to let everything bleed onto them because they're my inspiration and I can't taint that at all.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I agree. This conversation is what needed to happen, which is why I decided this season I was going to spend some time doing this, right? Because
hmm.
I needed it. Think we all need it, right? All of us. And I think Melissa, you brought in something interesting about like the program directors. I mentioned in a previous another episode, people like you said you're working with Melissa Salazar at Escala, people like Escala, people like me, right, who work a lot of time with HSIs, like
Yeah.
a lot of what I'm calling collateral damage, right? Like there's
Yes.
a lot of us, right? That's the direct
Mhm.
impact and then a lot of indirect impact, right?
Yeah.
And it's just spread, it's spread wide, right? The kind of loss that we're having to deal with, right? But we're gonna
Hmm.
take care of ourselves, committed to being a part of that conversation. So you're also now a part of the Que Pasa HSI's community.
Yay.
And that means you have to answer the final
All
question,
right.
which is ¿Qué pasa HSI? So, Dr. Menendez, how do you respond to that?
Aquí estamos y no nos vamos.
Yes, that part,
That's
that
right.
part. Yes. Natalie.
Yeah, for me, like, right, the title of the podcast, it's not que pasó HSIs. Let's not focus on what happened. Let's
Yes.
not put ourselves in the past.
Yes.
We are in the present, and this is going to be work that's going to be ever living, and what it's going to go on.
Absolutely. Thank you both for spending this time with me today on Que Pasa HSIs.
Thank you.
Thank you.